This presentation will give you a brief introduction to the ethics of research and the use of human and animal subjects in studies. Unlike healthcare ethics, where there is minimal formal regulation related to ethical conduct, research and the ethical use of subjects is heavily regulated and fiercely overseen. In this presentation, you'll begin to see why. One of the first precepts of the healthcare profession is to do no harm, and it would seem logical that this would carry through to research. But history belies the fact that many a well-intentioned researcher wandered from the best ethical path, and unfortunately, history is replete with some not so well-intentioned researchers as well. Formal codification of ethics in research is a relatively new phenomena. It wasn't until after the atrocities of the Nazi research physicians came to light that the world turned its attention to formalizing codes of research ethics. The Nuremberg Code in 1949 was a direct result of the horrific practices of the Third Reich. The Declaration of Helsinki that followed in 1964 was the most notable international agreement on the protection of human subjects. The Belmont Report in 1974 was the first U.S. regulation and addressed ethical dilemmas in research, situations in which the rights of study participants are in direct conflict with the requirements of a rigorous study. Despite the Nuremberg Code and the Declaration of Helsinki, unethical practices continued, including the Tuskegee syphilis study, which from 1932 to 1972 withheld treatment from poor African American men who had syphilis in order to research the progression of the disease. Multiple other breaches of research ethics finally led to the issuing of the Belmont Report, which sets forth ethical guidelines for research. The Belmont Report's recommendations form the basis of the U.S. Code covering all government-sponsored research, which is referred to as the Common Rule. Ethical dilemmas are not uncommon in research. There are many times when what is best for the subject is in direct conflict with what is best for rigorous study designs, so researchers must be careful to always put the interest of the subjects first. The Belmont Report set forth three basic principles that all researchers need to keep in mind for the protection of human subjects when conducting research: beneficence, respect for human dignity, and justice. Beneficence means that the researcher above all does no harm, but also tries to maximize the good. Beneficence is different from non-malfeasance, which minimizes harm. Beneficence actively seeks good. This means that any subject has the right to protection from harm, discomfort, and exploitation. Respect for human dignity means that the subject has the right to self-determination and the right to full disclosure. In research, this means that the subject is not coerced, either by the threat of withholding something such as treatment or by excessive rewards for participation. In addition, there is no deception or concealment that would potentially harm the patient or affect their decision to enroll, such as not disclosing side effects or withholding information on alternative treatments. This does not prohibit all concealment. Some is allowed, such as that is needed in order to conduct a blinded study, but the subject needs to be fully informed of the facts, such as that he or she may be assigned to a non-treatment group. Any concealment or deception must be approved by the Ethics Review Board in advance. Justice means the right to fair treatment and the participant's right to privacy. The most common interpretation of this is the equitable distribution of the benefits and burdens of research. Subjects should be chosen based on their suitability for the study, not because they are easy to persuade. Historically, subjects disproportionately represented compromised groups, such as the poor, prisoners, the institutionalized, or dying patients. The principle of justice imposes additional obligations on the researcher if a subject is vulnerable. In addition, researchers have the obligation to ensure that the subject's right to privacy is protected, meaning that only the minimum amount of personal information necessary to fulfill the study aim is collected. Procedures for protecting study participants include a number of obligations on the part of the researcher as listed here. Let's look at each of these in detail. The researcher should always perform a risk-benefit assessment to assure that the potential benefits of participating in the study are commensurate with the risks involved. So, for example, if the study offers no possibility of benefit to the participants, Risks should be no more than minimal. Potential benefits a subject might obtain from study participation include access to a potentially helpful intervention or cutting-edge treatment that might otherwise be unavailable, the ability to discuss their situation with a friendly, objective person, or increase self-knowledge via introspection or direct interaction with researchers. It also offers less tangible benefits, such as a chance to escape from the normal routine and the satisfaction that information could also help others with similar problems or conditions. Many studies also offer direct monetary or material gains through stipends or other incentives, but in recent years the use of these have been severely curtailed as they are viewed as being excessively coercive to people of lower socioeconomic status and therefore not just. Potential risks to participants are not insignificant. They include physical harm from the intervention as well as discomfort, fatigue, or boredom from the treatment regimen. They may suffer psychological distress resulting from self-disclosure, introspection, fear of the unknown, or discomfort with strangers, and anger or embarrassment at the type of questions being asked, especially if they are asked to relive traumatic or stressful life events. Participation may entail social risks such as stigma, adverse effects on personal relationships, loss of status, or loss of privacy. Research is also often time-consuming and may actually be a cost to the participant if they have to pay for transportation and lose time from work during participation. Before enrolling in a study, participants must give informed consent to the researcher and agree to participate. Informed consent means that participants have adequate information about the research, can comprehend the information, and have free choice in deciding whether to participate in or withdraw from the study. This means they are free from coercion or undue influence to participate. They also need to understand their rights as study participants. Informed consent is typically documented in one of three ways. A classic informed consent is a written form with all of the necessary information about the study that the subject signs and is given a copy to keep. For minimal risk studies such as non-intrusive surveys, there may actually be no signed form and consent is implied from the subject reading the participation information and completing the questionnaire. This is a good way to protect the subject's anonymity, especially if the consent form is the only document that may tie the subject to their responses in the study. Process consent is common in qualitative research, where the full nature of the study emerges during the study. In this case, the subject gives initial consent, but the consent is renegotiated over time as the aims of the study solidify and the subject is kept informed of changes in the research with his or her approval obtained for continued participation. Informed consent is best obtained by a neutral party, such as a research assistant. Having a person who is caring for the patient, such as a nurse or the attending physician, talk to the patient may be seen as a form of coercion due to their position of influence. Likewise, having the person who is in charge of the study talk to the patient may make the patient feel obligated to say yes. There are a number of ways a researcher can protect the privacy of a participant. If data is collected anonymously, even the researcher is unable to link participants to their data, and anonymity is guaranteed. If information is confidential, the researcher will not publicly report data that individually identifies them, nor will the data be made available to those outside of the study. In extreme cases where the collected information involves illegal activities such as substance abuse, a formal certificate of confidentiality can be obtained from the National Institutes of Health to prevent forced disclosure of confidential information to legal authorities or courts. This type of protection is critical to collect information and still protect subjects. Researchers must be especially mindful of vulnerable subjects who are defined as study participants who require special protections. The most formally listed vulnerable subjects are generally children who cannot make a truly informed decision about voluntary participation, pregnant women who are at higher than average risk due to the effects research might have on the unborn child, and prisoners who are subject to coercion and are in a powerless position. Other participants may be in compromised positions as well. The severely or terminally ill, mentally or emotionally disabled, and those in institutions may not be able to understand the consent process, may feel desperate, or may not feel free from coercion to refuse consent. Any potential subject who is not unquestionably of sound mind and free will should be carefully considered by the researcher. Human subjects committees review the ethical aspects of a study, giving guidance to the researcher and granting permission to conduct a study. In the United States, these committees are generally referred to as institutional review boards, or IRBs. In Canada, the same group is referred to as a research ethics board, or REB. Regardless, they will review all aspects of the study, including recruitment, consent, implementation, and data management, to ensure that the rights of subjects are properly protected and meet applicable guidelines. Their goal is not to judge the science and methods per se, even though they may comment on if the study meets institutional standards. Their goal is the protection of the subjects and their rights. There are similar committees that review research involving the use of laboratory animals in order to prevent cruelty and protect their welfare. They are referred to as IACUCs, or Institutional Animal Care and Use Committees. This has been a brief introduction to ethics in research. An ethical approach is crucial to the conduct, analysis, and interpretation of any study. Whenever you review a study, the ethical aspect should always be one of the aspects you critique. If you have additional questions, please don't hesitate to contact your instructor.